Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
Are you looking for your next true crime podcast? Do you crave stories that have mystery and suspense? Well, look no further. Introducing Love and Murder, the podcast that dives deep into the world of relationships gone horribly wrong. Every week, I take you on a journey through the dark side of love, where passion turns into obsession, families become enemies, and romance turns to murder. From mysterious mysteries to suspenseful suspense, I dive deep into cases of love gone wrong. So why should you listen to Love and Murder? Because this is not just another true crime podcast. We're your partners in crime.
Not guilty!
Your storytellers. And your weekly dose of suspenseful entertainment. How many times have I said suspenseful? So what are you waiting for? Join the Love and Murder family and become part of the Lamb community. Tune in every week for a new episode that will keep you hooked. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button now. Love and Murder, because you're either someone's last love or their first murder.
Love and Murder, available on all major podcast platforms. Not for true crimers under 18. Must be an apple juice drinking enthusiast, but not really. Side effects include enjoying another true crime podcast, becoming a lamb, learning logic and how to deal with your problems in a healthy manner, and not turn into murder. Waiting for the next episode of Love and Murder to drop every week. Visit our website at www.murderandlove.com.
And remember, all love and no murder. See you soon.
If this is your first time listening, I use swear words because I don't trust anybody who doesn't. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors, and welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ. I'd love to thank you for the DMs, emails, and condolence cards, Rainbow Warriors. You are all so very kind. And I would like to announce to those of you who participated in my call to action for the What the Fuck is a TERF episode, you all managed to cause an awful lot of grief for an organization that's committed to spreading hate against the trans community. Good job, guys! I can't really get into specifics other than to tell you that the protest group was shut down and not able to cause their menace on February 15th in Chowchilla. Looks like thanks to you, other troubles might be headed their way as well. So thank you all, and my source/friend thanks you too. Find me on the socials as Rainbow Crimes just about everywhere. Please consider joining my Patreon, where for less than a price of a cup of coffee a month, you can enjoy this show ad-free. Plus, the episodes are early release, so you get them first. I'll name a unicorn for you at the Seabreeze Studio stables, and you'll get an extra episode at the end of every month. If you'd like to join the club and become a patron member, I'll leave a link in the show notes. So I do have a missing but not forgotten LGBTQ person for you this episode. 35-year-old Tyler Goodrich went missing from the Lincoln, Nebraska area on November 3rd, 2023. As far as I can tell, Tyler has not been found yet. From all accounts, Tyler seemed like a great guy. As a child, he was always very considerate of others. In fact, one day he came home from elementary school and told his dad, "Dad, the lunch people at school make us cookies every day. Can we make them some cookies?" And together, he and his dad made cookies for the school's lunch staff. It would seem that Tyler has always been a champion for the underdogs. Tyler's been a very ambitious guy, too. He completed his master's in just 14 weeks. Tyler is also very active and he loves the outdoors. He's a marathon runner and extremely strong-willed. If he wants to do something, you better bet he's gonna get it done. Tyler comes from a good-sized family of 3 sisters and a brother. He grew up in Bennett, Nebraska, and as an adult, he moved to Lincoln, which is only about a 25-minute drive from his family's home. Tyler was in the military, and now he's a veteran. In 2015, Tyler met a man named Marshall Vogel at a gay bar in Lincoln. Marshall was walking by Tyler. and their eyes locked. This was one of those love at first sight situations. Within 2 years, the two men were married. They both wanted to have a family, and they started to go through the process with a foster agency. Their hopes were to foster a young child and then adopt that child. But before the process really got rolling, they received a phone call from the foster agency. The agency had a 14-year-old boy that needed placement immediately. Tyler and Marshall talked it over, and they decided to take that boy in. In 2021, they began the adoption process for the boy. But before the adoption was completed, the foster agency called the couple with a younger boy that needed placement. By 2023, Tyler and Marshall were dads to 2 boys. Now, those of us who have been in several or so romantic relationships, we know that not everything can be unicorns and rainbows 24/7. But we do what we can to get by. Rocky roads are going to happen. Tyler and Marshall's relationship was definitely taking one of those paths. Tyler worked about an hour away in Omaha at the Nebraska Department of Corrections. When he left work on Friday, November 3rd, 2023, he dropped by a Costco to pick up a pizza for himself and his family. The plans that night were to have a nice pizza and movie night with the fam. When he got home, his older boy was at work and he wasn't there. So only Tyler, Marshall, and their younger son got to enjoy the pizza and a movie night. At some point during the evening, before 8 p.m., Tyler and Marshall got into an argument, and it was so volatile that Marshall had to call 911. During this call is when Tyler left the home through the garage. Surveillance footage outside the back of their house shows what appears to be Tyler, and he is seen running away from his home. Like, he was just going out for a run to maybe blow off some steam. The guy in the video also appeared to have some type of flashlight attached to his arm. And I would just like to point out that the video has not been confirmed that this was Tyler, but it does appear to be him. Marshall's 911 call came in about 7:47 p.m., and 2 patrol cars were dispatched to the couple's home for a domestic disturbance. By the time they got there, Tyler was gone and he hasn't been seen since. The next day, Marshall filed a missing persons report when Tyler never returned back home. Tyler was wearing gray running shorts, a gray sweatshirt that partially zipped down in front. He's about 6'1" and weighs approximately 185 pounds. He has strawberry blonde, reddish-colored hair. His hair might be long, and he might be sporting a beard and a mustache as well. It's believed that he had his wallet and his phone on him when he left. Tyler's father says that Tyler's very active on social media, so it's extremely strange for him not to be connecting on there. From what I can tell, Tyler's family believes he's been abducted. Marshall's not being viewed as a suspect and has been more than cooperative with authorities. Although I have seen a few posts on the Facebook group, Let's Find Tyler Goodrich, and there's a few people out there that believe Tyler never left his home, and that video footage is not him running past the camera. And this is mostly because no one else who might have had surveillance cameras set on their property and streets, like the Ring, captured any footage of Tyler running by. A few people on that Facebook group have even alleged Marshall did something to Tyler in the home. But again, this is all speculation by others, and there's no evidence. It would seem within the past week or two, an anonymous handwritten letter was received by the police with tips about Tyler's disappearance. The police have tried to track down the author, but now they're asking the individual to come forward. They've specified if the author comes forward so they can ask questions for clarity, that person can remain anonymous. Should you have any information on Tyler's whereabouts, please contact the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, and you can get them at 402-441-6500. Or you can make an anonymous tip with Crime Stoppers at area code 402-441-4750 3600. Let's bring Tyler home. I have a very curious cold case for you this episode out of San Francisco, California. The case was presented to me by Julia. Julia is one of the hosts of the Consult podcast. Please check out the Consult podcast, as the hosts are 4 retired FBI agents and profilers. There is no muss, no fuss, and no bullshit on this show. They dig right in and they present the facts. Many of their cases are multiple parters, and there is a ton of depth in each and every case they cover. So be sure to take a listen. Again, that's the Consult, Real FBI Profilers. As I said, this episode's main case comes to us from San Francisco, California. The year was 2010. Yes, it's actually a 14-year-old cold case, but it's fresh enough that we might actually be able to find some answers and possibly even help solve it if we reach the right ears. 36-year-old Phillip Di Martino was a white gay man. He was originally from the state of Illinois. He'd been residing in the San Francisco area for quite a few years. At the time of his death, he was living at 138 Herman Street. This is in the Western Addition neighborhood near the lower Haight-Ashbury section. The property last sold for over $1,700,000 in December of 2022. It was once a single-family dwelling at nearly 3,000 square feet, which would have been a really good-sized home for a family, but it had been sectioned off into 10 small apartments. Phillip lived in apartment number 1, which was 2 flights above street level. If you were to walk up the stairs onto the home's front porch, you could look into Phillip's bedroom. There was another small apartment next to Phillip's and 2 below it. All of the rest of the apartments were around the back of the house, and you couldn't see them from the street. Phillip was a senior marketing executive with Archstone Properties. That's a company that constructs and provides upscale apartments in the San Francisco area. But Phillip on his own would help residentially challenged, unhoused people find low-rent apartments to live in. He served as an advisor for a nonprofit group called Housing Industry Foundation. This was one of the ways he wanted to give back to his community. For those of you who have never visited San Francisco, it's fucking expensive for one. Both my nieces and their husbands had been house shopping there, and oh my God, the price of some of the houses they were looking at were like almost $2 million. It was crazy. But also in San Francisco, there's a section of the city called the Castro District. It's known as the gayest area of San Francisco, really. Several years ago, probably more like 12 or 13 years ago, I went to San Francisco Pride with many members of my group of friends that were called the Chapstick Mafia. During the day, most of the festivities were at a park. Dolores Park, I think, but I could be wrong about the park. And at night, the majority of the fun was happening in the Castro section. The following day was the parade, and it was a great time with great friends. Phillip was single, and that's how Phillip liked it. He didn't want to be tied down to any relationship. He enjoyed frequenting bars in the evenings at the Castro. One bar in particular was his favorite, and that was a bar called Badlands. He'd often hit up Badlands happy hour and get the cheap drinks before the night got really started. The bad thing about that is when Phillip got drunk, he'd often get kind of rude and disorderly. Usually, Phillip would take someone home with him from the bars. Phillip would also find dates on social media, and he preferred to bring the guys to his home. So oftentimes he would divulge his address on social media. The evening of Friday, July 30th, 2010, Phillip headed to his favorite venue, Badlands, after work. He was just in time for happy hour. It was around 5 p.m., and Phillip stayed till about 9 p.m. No one observed him leave with anyone, but that doesn't mean he didn't. And he may have even hit up another gay nightclub afterwards, no one's quite sure. But he most likely taxied home as he normally did when he was done at Badlands. And Phillip had a type of guy that he liked as well. He liked them a little younger than he was, thin, Hispanic, or Asian men. The reason I believe Phillip went directly home and didn't go to another bar is because Phillip's neighbor reported hearing a high-pitched male's voice saying, "No, stop," around 9:45 coming from the vicinity of Phillip's apartment. If he had left Badlands around 9 p.m. and the "no, stop" was coming from his apartment around 9:45, that didn't give him much time to go to another nightclub, drink and peruse around, find someone, and head home. Also, the very last text Phillip sent was to a friend around 9:30 p.m. It is feasible that the neighbor got the time wrong or heard the no stops coming from elsewhere, but it's unlikely. On Monday, August 2nd, 2010, Phillip missed a very important meeting at his work. This was uncharacteristic of Phillip to not show or call. His supervisor had said that Phillip was a good employee with an excellent attendance record, which is why a little while after the meeting, one of Phillip's co-workers decided to drop by Phillip's apartment and see if he could find Phillip home. The co-worker arrived at 138 Herman Street, climbed the stairs to the apartments, and he knocked on the door. When there was no reply, the co-worker peeked into Phillip's bedroom window. What the co-worker saw was a very bloody Phillip lying on the floor, seemingly unresponsive. Emergency services were called, and Phillip was pronounced dead on the scene. Investigators found a lot of blood in Phillip's bedroom and bathroom, and there were even droplets scattered around his living room. There were no signs of forced entry into the small apartment. Phillip had been stabbed 48 times, mostly in his back, his neck, his chest, and his abdomen. But the knife thrusts were so forceful that some of the blows broke several of Phillip's ribs. His autopsy report cause of death is listed as death by sharp force injuries and blunt force injuries. With 48 stab wounds, Phillip's murderer definitely was passionate about killing him. But why? And who was this killer? The retired FBI profilers of the podcast The Consult tend to believe that the killer had mental health issues, which prompted such a strong and emotional reaction. Perhaps the person was hyped up on drugs, and it could have even been a combination of the two. Mental health issues and drugs. This killer may have wanted to have more of a relationship with Phillip, and he was angry with Phillip's desire to be single. But the killer must have known Phillip, which is why there were no signs of forced entry. He apparently was invited inside. To this day, we still don't know who Phillip's killer is, or even if he was out as a gay man or not. It's believed he presents as a gay man and is comfortable hanging out in the Castro area. It's also thought the killer's first language is Spanish. And that's because the police did find 2 notes that were left presumably by the assailant, and they were written in Spanish. They were also written on 2 different types of paper and placed in different areas in Phillip's apartment. The notes both had blood droplets on them, and they've never been released publicly by law enforcement. Also, nothing seemed to be stolen from Phillip's apartment. Investigators believe that the killer is a Hispanic man. He would be of slim build, and he would have had cuts on his own hands after Phillip's attack. It appeared the killer attempted to bandage his own wound in Phillip's apartment. There was also an overturned laundry hamper in Phillip's apartment that was discovered. The attacker may have had so much blood on himself, he needed a change of clothes, which is why he rummaged through Phillip's clothing. And Phillip was a slender man, so the killer would have to also be a slender man. Police still claim that Phillip's murder's an active investigation, but it also seems to have gone cold. And this brings us back to many questions we probably all have about the evidence. For example, the killer's cut on his hand. Investigators obviously found a second type of blood other than Phillip's. The notes written in Spanish, what did they say? Would the notes provide a clear motive for Phillip's murder? were fingerprints left. 14 years later, and the police are still holding the evidence close to their vests. Wouldn't it make more sense to share some of the info and try to catch this killer? They apparently have the killer's DNA, and possibly fingerprints. Is there no match for him in any of the national databases? How about genetic genealogy? Has the DNA been ran through the private companies like Ancestry or 23andMe? Since this case still needs to be solved, and it really can use more exposure, please share this episode, especially if you knew anyone living in the San Francisco area in 2010. Should you have any information, please contact the San Francisco Police Department Homicide Detail at area code 415-553-1145. Or you can call the San Francisco Police Department Anonymous Tip Line at 415-575-4444. Phillip Di Martino's case number is number 100704683. Rest in power, Phillip. Our true crime quickie case this episode comes to us from India. In 2014, a man named Derapalli Venkatash married a woman named Vida Shri. The following year, the couple had a baby together. After several years of their not-such wedded bliss, Derapalli began to allegedly bother Vida about releasing more of her dowry to him. You see, Derapalli needed a surgery. It was not an emergency surgery, but it was a necessary one. Derapalli knew he was a woman and was in the beginning steps of transitioning. Derapalli also wanted to be called Roja. The money was necessary for gender reassignment surgery. Vida was not pleased her husband wanted to be a woman, nor did she understand Roja's need to be a woman. She did not want to part with her dowry for an operation she did not approve of. Plus, she felt very bullied by Roja. This, of course, was according to Vida. But in all honesty, it was Vida's money. She should get to say how she wants to spend it. By 2019, Derapalli officially took on the name Roja and had completed her surgery. Vida had moved out and took custody of their child. Vida, who worked as a teacher at a private school, still demanded child support from Roja. Roja didn't like this new arrangement, and she definitely didn't like Vida's demands. So Roja started to come to Vida's work and harass her. As a result, Vida lost her job. By now, 30-year-old Vida was living with another man named Ramesh. Vida told Ramesh of her hatred of her ex Roja and how she felt very screwed over by her. Ramesh was sympathetic to Vida's claims, and together the couple began to devise a plan. This plan was to murder Roja. The two paid another man to help them pull off their attack on Roja. And on December 11, 2023, Roja was invited to the home shared by Vida and Ramesh. The man for hire was also there. Roja was offered and drank several beers with Vida and the men. Then at one point, the two men took a pillow and they smothered Roja to death. They were trying to make her death appear from natural causes. But when police questioned Vida and Ramesh, what they were saying just was not adding up. Police accused Vida of lying, and she immediately crumbled, and she admitted to their plan of murdering Roja. Vida, Ramesh, and the man they hired were all arrested. But since this case was so recent, there's been no penalty phase of the case yet. Rest in power, Roja. I love you, Rainbow Warriors. You matter. And remember, it is not a crime to be gay or to live your truth, unless you're a murderer.